We have memed about it, you have cried about it, we have been very sad in a dark corner, but Feral Druid has been addressed finally. Is this the last spec that needed to be addressed that hasn't been having any news for a gazillion years? Yes, Feral Druid in Dragonflight is looking really good. Like, man, it's like a whole different take on the spec with a lot of the issues fixed. And that is what we are going to be talking about today in this alpha, beta actually, video coverage of the talents for Feral and kind of how they feel in the content with the limited amount of dungeon testing that we can do with things that die in 3 seconds and me not being able to put some fucking bleeds on shit, man. God damn it. God damn it. But also, if you like the video and the content that we're doing with the daily videos and all this cool stuff, quality sound, quality video, quality lights, quality footage, and all this nice, really cool stuff, consider supporting us by checking the Patreon page with the link down in the description for, you know, giving a little bit back. It actually helps us a lot. We are pretty much very, very grateful for the Patrons for actually making this possible. It would be, I'm gonna tell you guys, it would be very difficult to do it without you guys, and you are actually one of the main reasons why we are able to do all of the things that we do. The beta videos, the guides, the TLFs, the podcasts, the streams, even everything because of you, dear viewers, and of course the patrons. Thank you very much. And now, without further ado, let's actually go into the talents and talk a little bit about Feral. First of all, the general talent tree hasn't actually changed at all. Like, I couldn't notice a single thing that changed. You can still path all the way to Furor and then take Typhoon if you so desire, so you can basically get all the Feral things that you could get and also get all the balance utility that you could also get. It's not that bad. You can, instead of getting Typhoon, if you don't need Typhoon, you can go a little bit more healing focus, you could go a little bit more bear focus with more damage taken reduced or anything like that. It is actually up to you. The one thing that I still don't see here is strictly tied to Furor, and Guiltius already made a really good post about this on the forums with the feedback for Dragonflight Druids. You should definitely check that out after this video if you're interested in more in-depth Feral stuff. But Furor is a good example as to how basically Ferals are incentivized to play Owl Weaving. And if you don't know what Owl Weaving is, let's say you're casting your finishers and you're low on energy, low on combo points, you swap out of Feral and you go into Boomkin and then you just slap some Sunfires and Moonfires. And if you took Heart of the Wild, you might even go with a Star Surge, then shift back into Feral. By the time you're doing this, your energy bar will be almost full and you can start breaking and doing all the good things all over again. This is a playstyle that has been going on with Feral for a while, especially if you want to optimize your damage output. You ideally don't really lose much of anything during this time, unless you have, I don't know, Tiger's Fury up and you're losing melee damage, but outside of that, your energy will just regenerate very slowly, and by the time your full bar of energy has been regenerated, you can cast a couple of spells in Boomkin form, and Furor basically does that. Furor basically allows you to do that because it doesn't really incentivize you doing, it doesn't really affect your Feral form. You're never not gonna be in Feral for 15 seconds at a time. That's not how the spec plays. So what I personally would like to see, and maybe more kitties out there, is a Capstone that can, you know, reward Ferals for playing Feral. Because so far, all of the Capstones seem to reward everybody else for not playing Feral. Nobody's going to use Furor and go into cat form except for maybe, I don't know, Resto Druids, but they could still Owl Weave. So something along the lines of that would be great. Otherwise, as Feral, you're probably never gonna go down to Furor ever. And that's weird because, I mean, if Furor has been like core mechanic of Feral for years and it doesn't give the crit anymore, not specifically not to your party. And also this could also be addressed with the other issue that Feral might have that still hasn't been touched, is the addition to group value, let's say. Since you do have certain utility, the utility that you do bring to the group is not necessarily restricted to Feral. The Bears, Resto Druids, and Balance Druids can give, and Furor could have been one of that where, you know, in the past, Furor used to give you and your party crit chance. I think it was 1-2% crit chance, which was still enough, but it was a good reason to have a Feral in a party. So, I don't know, maybe we can go back to that. That would be cool. But I digress. Let's actually talk about the actual Feral talents, which are fucking night and day different, man. Holy shit. good. It's massive improvements. Granted, there's still like one or two things that could be better, but considering the state that Feral was in prior to this change, fuck, man, this actually looks like a spec now. Clearly, it still has a little bit ways to go to get to the levels of stuff like Enhancement Shaman, I don't know, Fury Warriors, of Unholy DKs and things like that. But right now it's looking way better, and it is on the path to some good things. First of all, what you will notice is that Primal Wrath has been moved way up. So essentially your AoE kit is going to be very, very accessible. I don't think you can skip Primal Wrath. I mean, you could probably just path down on the left hand side and take pretty much everything except Primal Wrath if you so desired, but I mean, it's not really worth it. You can avoid it if you don't want to do any type of AoE. However, the right-hand path that is unlocked by Primal Wrath does unlock some really good talents that are good in single target as well. And we're gonna keep going down. First of all, Sabertooth is still there, but it has been reworked. It's a little bit on the left-hand side. Now, Sabertooth makes Ferocious by deal 20% increased damage and increase all damage dealt by Rip by 4% per combo point spent for 4 seconds. Which is great because the constant refresh of Rip has been something that a lot of Ferals have been spoken against, myself included. I was not necessarily a fan. I mean, it's cool. I know some people like it and that's fine, but that just removes one button from your rotation and it makes applying bleeds like a non-thing ever. And that's already particularly weird for Feral. Not to mention that I'm not gonna go into all of them, but you have received as a Feral a lot of talents that buff a Rip as well. So essentially the bleed top part of your rotation, the bleed part of your playstyle will deal a little bit more damage. Will it deal more damage than bites? I don't know. We'll see how the tuning is because right now numbers are particularly irrelevant. Predator is still there and you can still get it. It's on the opposite side of Sabertooth. They have always been kind of at a choice that you could take between the two. You can actually have both of them right now, which is, you know, the benefits of having this particular talent tree. There are also, what you might be interested in more than anything, is new tools for AoE. And first of all, you don't really have the tier set component that, you know, when you pop Berserk, you just bleed out a lot in AoE, which a lot of specs have gone the tier set. Now it's not like the burst tier set, but it was really cool to slap a big fat bleed in AoE. That's not it, but we do have a bunch of other stuff. First of all, you have doubled clawed rake, which you can get before you actually even access the first gate. Rake also applies rake to one additional nearby target, which is, it's not a complicated mechanic, it's not something out of the ordinary. It is cleave, and I don't know if Feral ever had something like this as well, but there are situations in AoE where you want to apply rake. Rake is a big part of your damage, well, at least right now in Shadowlands in terms of bleed, so it's good that you have to cast fewer. Plus, it's, you know, a similar mechanic that kind of Boomkins had with Moonfire, where they can apply Moonfire to 2 targets at once with each cast. This is basically rake, and that's really good, especially since there's a lot of rake improvement talents, which we will go into in a second. The other one is Tear Open Wounds. Primal Wrath consumes up to 4 seconds of rip damage on targets it hits and deals 75% of it instantly. Now, this in practice is really good. So what I've been able to see, I don't know exactly how the system calculates it, because let's say you do a 5 combo Primal Wrath, right? That puts a rip for 12 seconds on the enemies, and then you do another Primal Wrath that consumes 4 of those 12 seconds. It deals that damage instantly, and it also applies 12 more seconds of rip, which is actually, I think this mechanic is very good. It's very good because you would end up in Shadowlands, especially if you have a very geared Feral, where you would Primal Wrath, you would get to 5 combo points again, and the rips that you've applied are still barely halfway done. So you'd be able to get to 5 combo points in less than 6 seconds. Primal Wrathing again being a little bit weird to do so, especially since Primal Wrath's damage in Shadowlands is not particularly amazing anyway. So you would at some points feel like, or at least actually be advised to, Primal Wrath bite in terms of the order of your AoE spenders, which was weird because why would you single target a spender in AoE? Now you can basically back-to-back Primal Wraths with a lot more value, since it does more instant damage if the targets of course already have rip out. So that's really cool. Obviously the damage and everything is still subject to tuning. We have add-ons right now on the beta, however the tuning is really weird, and especially since I've played some of the dungeons with my live Feral, which is not very geared, but it's decently geared to 70-ish eye level, something like that, so 60 to 70. And I've made a new Druid on beta that's, you know, the template gear that you get 190. So for instance, if you haven't played Shadowlands, you're gonna start with some starter gear. Either you're boosting it or you're leveling it by yourself. The gear won't be that amazing, and you can tell in the dungeons by the cadence of the fights that things just die really quickly. So I couldn't really tell how good this is. Plus it felt like a better way to do AoE damage is with yet another AoE talent that's really cool, Ferocious Frenzy. This right now seems to overall burst for a little bit more, so maybe this is probably something that you're going to be using in low keys, low dungeons, stuff like that, where things die quick. What this does is Ferocious Bite hits all nearby enemies affected by your rip for 25% of the damage dealt. Damage reduced beyond 5 targets, so it's kind of like soft kept to 5 targets. You'll still have to Primal Wrath first to put the rips out, but then you can bite, and depending on the gear that you have, you might be able to bite twice before Primal Wrathing again. On theory, this is really good because you have two ways of using finishers for AoE damage. I don't know which one is better though, because they both seem to kind of conflict with each other in terms of a playstyle. Like, when would you back-to-back Primal Wrath, or when would you just use Ferocious Bite? So I would imagine that Primal Wrath should be ideally maybe better in massive AoE, since Primal Wrath is not AoE capped, while Ferocious Bite could be in low target cleave, low pack count. So for instance, if you're playing pugs, you might be using bites as a finisher instead, since usually pug tanks don't pull a lot of packs, so one pack at a time. Maybe Ferocious Frenzy will be your jam. And you have both anyway, and you cannot, I mean, you could get Ferocious Frenzy without getting tear open wounds, but why would you? It's so cool. And I've mentioned the upgrades for Rakam, one of which is Infected Wounds, which you might notice, but it also got a neat little buff. It does the movement slow, but it also increases the rake damage by 30. Now it says 30 in the tooltip on Wallhead. I think it's a flat percentage in the actual game. It's still extra rake damage, so that's really good. It's definitely a more, let's say, incentivized point to take in terms of the talents. And you can keep going down to, although this is something that maybe they can fix, you will have to go down to a choice node, but you will have to go down from Ferocious Frenzy. It's weird that Infected Wounds is kind of like a dead-end talent, but I mean, we're not strangers to this. Anyway, you'll get Brutal Slash versus Wild Slashes. So Brutal Slash has always been the single target option on the road that we have right now, that replaces swipe and deals, like, you know, it's a better single target talent, but it's still AoE. Now you can still get Brutal Slash if you so desire. You can also get Wild Slashes, which makes swipe and thrash damage increase by 20%. So, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, simple. There's not much to it. It's 20% extra damage. However, it is from the generators, then it is from AoE generators, so that's actually not that bad. You don't just pack everything into a finisher. It's still pretty good. And, you know, you don't fuck around with replacing or using Brutal Slash in any way. And you will go down to another choice node, which is Vein Ripper versus Rip and Tear. Vein Ripper is Rip, Rake, and Thrash, last 25% longer in terms of their duration. This could have some interesting interactions with the Primal Wrath playstyle that I mentioned. And obviously Rake and Thrash is good, especially for Thrashes. You probably don't want to thrash too much. Although you do have Scent of Blood, which I didn't mention before. It's a little bit higher up there, where each enemy hit by trash reduces the swipe energy cost by 3 for the next 6 seconds. So if you, let's say, thrash 5 targets, swipe costs 15 energy less for 6 seconds. So that's, you know, good in terms of energy management, but I digress. And with this, we can talk about something that's a little bit more obvious and one of the major problems that Feral used to have before, and that is the Berserk cooldown that prior to this has been split into 3. It's still split now, but it's a little bit different, and also it's a little bit more accessible. Likely, you will want to get both of the Berserks, but not 100% necessarily. So the one on the right hand side where we are, where we're talking about, you know, the AoE, is Berserk Frenzy, and it makes Berserk your combo point generating abilities bleed the target for an additional 150% of their damage over 8 seconds. I don't know how the playstyle will be with this in Dragonflight, but right now in Shadowlands, what you would normally do is you would just generate combo points, consume combo points, generate combo points, consume combo points. You would never really build up to a max 5 combo points and then use a finisher. This is the Berserk Frenzy playstyle. I don't know if this will be efficient in Dragonflight as well, but this is what it is. It also has Berserk Heart of the Lion, which is on the left-hand side of the talent tree. And Heart of the Lion is, I think, the 2 set that we have right now. Each combo point spent reduces the cooldown of Berserk by 0.5 seconds. It's either the 2 set or it's the Conduit, one of which I know reduces the Berserk cooldown when you spend combo points. So, you know, you have that. I mean, that's good. It remains to be seen how valuable it is if you want to path all the way to the left-hand side just to get this. And to kind of work similarly to Berserk, at the bottom side in the capstone for the middle part, you have Incarnation, Avatar of Ashamain, add a choice node with Convoke the Spirits. Avatar of Ashamain, the Incarn version will replace basically Berserk and get all the effects of Berserk, and basically what it will do, I guess it depends on what the talents for Berserk that you've picked. Obviously it's a stronger cooldown, and it also unlocks the Capstone, which is Ashamain's Guidance. Now this will have a different effect depending on which talent you've chosen. If you've chosen the Incarnation, which is what we're talking about, your melee attacks have a chance to activate Incarnation Avatar of Ashamain for 6 seconds without the ability to enter stealth in combat. So you still get 6 seconds of Incarn. You don't get going to stealth, but however, you still get 6 seconds of a lot of buffs depending on which Berserks you've chosen, and maybe for this one you might want both of those Berserks. And considering that there are a bunch of talents that increase your haste, I think there's at least 2 off the top of my head in the Feral talent tree that increase the haste. Obviously that would increase the frequency of your melee attacks. That could also increase the proc chance of Ashamain's Guidance, unless it has a fixed procs per minute chance to go through. I'm not sure if this has been data mined or theory crafted yet. I guess we'll see once Dragonflight will be live. And this is the middle part of the talent tree with the current capstones. And before we go to the left-hand side, you still have Apex Predator, which is the legendary right now, which is actually really cool. And maybe with this and the Ferocious Frenzy talent before in AoE, maybe you'll just spam your combo points finishers on Primal Wrath and then just use the procs from Apex to use Bite and deal that extra cleave damage from the talent that I've just mentioned. And it caps out with Circle of Life and Death, not Cycle. Circle of Life and Death, which is also again the legendary. Your damage over time effects deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effects in 15% less time. Obviously this is good in single target, and it has been used in single target, and I think some people still use it now in Mythic Plus. I haven't checked in a while. However, I will be curious to know how this will factor once again with the Primal Wrath talent Tear Open Wounds that essentially eats up duration of Rip. Obviously this could double dip into the damage of Tear Open Wounds, where 4 seconds of Rip will be 4 seconds of more damage if you take Circle of Life and Death, and that translates into more instant damage from Primal Wrath. So that could be really interesting. We'll see exactly how the synergy between the talents are, because sometimes they don't work together, even though you might think that it's pretty obvious that they do. And I mentioned before some of the haste options that you will get as a Feral. And all the way to the left-hand side, you have a couple of choice notes. First of all, it's Raging Fury and Frantic Momentum. Raging Fury makes finishing moves extend the duration of Tiger Fury by 0.4 seconds per combo point spent. So if you use a 5 combo point finisher, that's 2 seconds of extra Tiger Fury. Which, I mean, that's good, even though you have Predator. It depends. This is probably something for single target. This seems to be like the single target side of the talent tree, although I don't see why this wouldn't be really good in AoE as well, but I guess for AoE you would probably get Predator. Frantic Momentum though. Finishing moves have a 3% chance per combo point spent to grant 10% haste for 6 seconds. 10% haste is a lot of haste. It's a lot of haste. It's on a low proc chance, on a potentially, I don't know, 12 to 15% proc chance per finishing move, which is not a lot, but 10% haste is good enough, especially if you do get Ashamain's Guidance, like I mentioned before. And there's also another talent higher up in the tree that gives you haste. Not that important, but you do get sources of haste, which is really good. The choice node that's right below this is Bite Force versus Blood Talents. Blood Talents is pretty much still the same. You want to use 3 different combo point generator. Within 4 seconds, the damage of your next 2 rips or ferocious bites is increased by 30%. It's the playstyle that we've been having so far. But Bite Force is a choice node if you don't particularly like blood talent, since a lot of people don't like the playstyle. Now you have options, which is really good because it's obvious that the devs are listening. Bite Force basically makes Ferocious Bite and Rip deal 15% increased damage. It's a flat damage increase, it's more or less boring. It's not as awesome as Blood Talents, however, it's way easier to play. You don't have to wrap your heads around about what finishers have I used in the last 4 seconds. Do I need to use a swipe or a rake or a thrash or a shred? Which one? You don't need to worry about that. You can just take bite force and still have more damage. So that's fantastic. And of course you will have adaptive swarm that goes into unbridled swarm as a capstone. Yeah, you have that. It's not my favorite covenant ability transformed into a talent, but that's what you have. It's still a little bit weird that the capstone is a 2-pointer where all the other capstones are 1-pointers, considering that adaptive swarm is placed slightly weird because on the left of it you have Feral Frenzy, and Feral Frenzy has always been a decently strong talent. However, it was always on a competitive row. Now it's no longer on a competitive row. However, it is a dead end talent that does not go down into the capstone. Neither does Raging Fury versus not Raging Fury, I'm sorry, Bite Force versus Blood Talents. So the capstone, which is Unbridled Swarm, can only be accessed through Adaptive Swarm, and if you do take any of the two that I mentioned before, Feral Frenzy or the Choice Node, you're not building towards Adaptive Swarm and the capstone. So this is a weird kind of position, which I guess might be similar to Apex Predator, where it's also a dead end that doesn't build towards the capstone. Maybe this is supposed to balance out the option that Feral gets, so that is not particularly overpowered. However, you probably will still want all three. I don't know. It's fine. We'll probably need to be level 70. We'll probably need to do a couple of raid bosses and a couple of Mythic Plus to see exactly how restrictive these positions are. However, it's looking pretty good. There could be a couple of improvements. Maybe Berserk made a little bit more accessible, but we'll see how that turns out. What do you think about Feral? Isn't this like an amazing change? A lot of the things have been listened to, a lot of the things have been addressed. It reminds me of Shadow Priest, where a lot of people had problems with specific spells. Those have been addressed. Similar to Feral, specific spells have had issues like Sabertooth and Blood Talent, and Primal Wrath as well. They have been addressed again, and it's clear that they're listening to feedback. Thank you, devs, for actually paying attention to the big brains like Guiltius and all the big ferals in the Dream Grove Discord community. Thank you for watching the video. Once again, if you want to support our content and you want to be a part of the community, the Patreon community, the link is down below to our Patreon page. You might find some goodies that you will like, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.